The Pastor's Heart and Dominic Steele, and thanks for joining us today. Change Management with Raj Gupta. We want to make changes in our churches and we need to make changes in our churches, but there are all sorts of war stories about church change resistance. Raj Gupta is the Senior Minister of St Paul's in Carlingford in Sydney, and he's the Director with the Centre for Ministry Development at Moore Theological College. Raj, our pastor's heart, and tragic war stories of well-meaning ministers having good intentions and things blow up in their face, our faces, because of change management gone wrong.
Stories everywhere, Dominic, and even as you're saying that, I can see in your eyes and face you have some of those stories you can share as well. I have some war stories. and just taking a step back, as saying once someone, which I remember from them was, the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ does not change, but the church must constantly be changing. And if you look at the pace of change in our world, it's just accelerating and accelerating and accelerating as global technology, as online, as all kinds of things now just happen.
If we just think architecture and design layout of buildings, we've all changed our kitchens, we've all changed our lounge rooms, and yet so many churches still look like they're museum pieces.
Yeah, well, not your church, Dominic, but everyone. Yes. We do struggle with change.
I'm suggesting, and I don't know if you agree with me, but sometimes we want big change, sometimes there's medium change, and sometimes there's little change. Do we have to use these theories for all of them?
Thank you. There's absolutely all kinds of changes. You know, big strategic shifts in direction might be one. But then there's minor things. You know, the change you make on the handout this coming Sunday.
We might move our handout from landscape to portrait or something like that.
So, no, you don't have to, and it would be onerous to use the same kind of process. But I think the beauty in some of these models and frameworks is that they do help us understand and reflect on human dynamics. Those human dynamics are going to be the case no matter what the changes are. And so rather than necessarily thinking big changes, medium, small, or whatever it is, it may be more helpful to think of, you know, are you expecting a pushback on whatever it is? No point going through a whole exercise if everyone's on board and it's just an obvious
It's going to be easy to get away with it.
Or if you have to do it, you know, COVID lockdown, what choice do you have? But then there are more significant things. And, we can learn a lot.
Okay. Where's one that blew up for you?
Yeah, well, look, you want me to go first? How long do we have? Look, I'll pick one, which really was the one that got me into this space. And I was at many years ago now, and it was a simple thing. Many churches now are designed as landscape kind of things. You want to get people close up, more engaged. Comes out of a postmodern kind of environment where we want people to be more involved, not just observers. So the formal way was, you know, you design portrait kind of auditoriums, longer ones where it was one-dimensional kind of learning. More modern ones have landscape where you want people more involved. Now, I understood that in my head, but I didn't go through it. I didn't know any of this.
Any change management stuff,
Any of his change management stuff. And so went about it in a particular way, and it all blew up. All kinds of people were unhappy.
People just turned up and the seats were different one week?
Well, it wasn't quite like that, but not too far off. And there were a group of people that were aware, but they were aware they weren't involved, they weren't owning it, they weren't with me, they weren't tolerating me in that regard. So it ended up blowing up. We reverted back on that occasion, reflecting on why...
You're actually in a worse position.
You are.
Than before you started, if you've done it and then gone back.
Well, yes, although there is something, you know, maybe not on the federal politics scene at the moment, but led up to an election, but to admit you've made a mistake and for people to see that you're listening to them, which ironically is one of the big things we're going to talk about in change management, that is very significant. So you can, with God's help, you know, seek to redeem things. But at that time, for me, I didn't know any of this, and it was a colleague who just at that point said to me, "Raj, have you heard about John Kotter?"
Yeah, so tell us about him, because he's the guru in this space.
He's the guru in this space, and I didn't know then that really this, you know, the change management, technical term perhaps, but this is a whole thing. And there's so much written about this stuff, and it's a guy called John Kotter back in the 1990s originally, written stuff in the 2000s, re-released more recently, and he really is the father of change management in a secular sense, and that's what we can learn from.
Just before we go through his logic, one more question, because you were telling me a few weeks ago there's a difference between how the nimble church plant will approach change management and how the established church will approach change management.
Yeah.
And a lot of our kind of church theorisation at the moment in our circles is coming from the church plant school, and I think you were saying they're not so good on the change management issues.
Well, look, the way I would just
putting
think
words
of it
into
is,
your mouth there.
I didn't quite say that, but there's a lot we could learn in all kinds of places. And when you're dealing with an established church, you need to be so careful, so careful. My former church, my current church, have decades and decades and decades of history. My former church, we had a 125-year anniversary.
Yeah.
That's a lot of history. That's a lot of culture. And so I can't just come and impose a whole new thing. And even if it's the right thing, even if it's a good thing, and so on. So there is a different dynamic when you're starting a church from scratch. You don't have that history. In fact, people used to say, and still do, one of the advantages of church planting is you don't have that history. You can start afresh. And another way of putting at it, that is, you don't have to go through change management. Now, in my context, in your context, the longer a church has been around, there's a history. That means people are attached to certain things. They might be good things, they might not be so good things. I think it's good that churches are attached to the gospel.
Yeah.
You know, there's good things, but then there's also particular ways of doing things that we can so easily become attached to. So I do think we need to be very, very careful in the Developing Rectors program. You mentioned I'm the director of that. I actually think this topic of change management, and I say to every group coming through, our number one most important topic is staffing. Our number two most important topic is change management. Because I just think we're not very good at doing this. And I've got a theory as to why. And that is, this is myself and some CMD colleagues, this is our little theory. As people trained in theology, we have in a sense been trained to be experts in an area, which is exegesis, which is understanding the Bible, which is theology. And it is true, particularly you go to a place like Moore College, it's among the best in the world, if not the best in the world. We have a high degree of confidence. But I think what we do, and the other thing is we're trained and we exercise a preaching ministry because the Word of God is declared. I think that's entirely appropriate for preaching because that's our job. But we can so easily and I think accidentally, not intentionally, we can import that method of declaring into other aspects of church life where we shouldn't. You know, God has equipped the whole 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4. There's people with lots and lots of different gifts, and the role of a minister there is to help the body work together. Now, so my theory, I haven't read this anywhere, I might be wrong, I'd love any feedback on this actually, but we import the method of understanding the Bible and preaching into other aspects of church life. So, as the caricature goes, we come into church life with the tablets. We've gone to Mount Sinai on our personal little retreat. We've come back with the plan on the tablets, and we say to everyone, "Here it is," in whatever way. But we haven't gone through change management. We haven't empowered people. We haven't brought people with us.
Okay.
And that's what all this is about.
Number one, establish a sense of urgency around an opportunity or problem.
Yeah. So I've given you
this is Kotter's framework, yeah.
John Kotter's framework. I've tweaked it a little bit for the Developing Rectors program and for a church environment, but 8 steps. And really, as someone said to me many years ago, You can be tempted to skip some of these steps. If you do, particularly on bigger things, they usually will come back to bite you in some way. So number one, establish a sense of urgency around an opportunity or a problem. So John Kotter, he had an initial framework and he just talked about the problem. So sometimes that's called burning platform. If we stay here, something's going to burn, something's going to blow up. He then, in his revision, in about 2012 or thereabouts, he introduced, he just nuanced it, the opportunity, because sometimes there's an opportunity, and if you don't pursue something, there's an opportunity, in our case with the gospel, that's lost. So it can be a need, you have to, or it can be an opportunity.
Now, you've just become senior minister, I don't know, a year or two ago at St Paul's Carlingford, and I noticed that you've gone through change management on moving from generalist to specialist in your staffing structure. How did you establish a sense of urgency around an opportunity or problem there?
Yeah, great question. Well, so we went through, we combined this with a strategy process. Quite an extensive process, challenging in lockdown, lots of things. But we at this stage, we involved lots of people. We did surveys, we talked to people. I had, coffee and dessert nights, 15 a go over a term, and we talked to lots and lots of people to hear what were the needs, what were the opportunities. We did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and all of that was feeding into this. What do we need to move forward on? What was holding us back?
I got the sense you kind of said, actually, we're underperforming on what we could be.
At no point did I turn up and say, that's what I think. I was in a genuine research phase. And sure, some of that was happening in staff context, some of that was in parish council contexts, some of that was any and every opportunity for me. Every conversation was an opportunity to hear and listen to what people thought. That genuinely formed my own thinking, and so later on in the journey I repeated what other people said. People were on the page because people were genuinely involved in that process.
I think maybe I heard you repeating back what other people had said, and that we need to that's what people said consistently. And so if people are saying, actually, we are underperforming what we could be doing, then there is a genuine sense of urgency around an opportunity or problem.
Yeah, and the kinds of things that people would say, and this distinction's so important. That wasn't, at no point, I hope, and I didn't have a view. People would say, Raj, what are you going to do? I say, well, I want to hear what people think. I want to hear what we're up to. In a genuine way. And coming out of that were a load of opportunities. People talked in my context about declining mission heat, and just making the observation the gospel should propel us to want to reach people, and we need to do better. So that was the kind of thing I was beginning to put together. There was a need, there was an opportunity, there was a sense, to whom much is given, much is expected. There was a whole lot of things feeding into that. Build
and maintain a powerful guiding coalition. What do you mean by that?
Well, what John Kotter means by that, it's not, me original, but in our church life, you can't. This is the Mount Sinai thing, it's sometimes called. Sometimes people say they've gone away for a week, they've come back, and there's various ways people put it, not so much in our circles, but some might say, God has given me a plan. Other people might say, here's what I have come back and learnt, or here's what I've come back and... You can't do that. You need to bring people with you on the journey. And I think there's a great... So I've learned, as I said to you before, Dominic, I've learned what I've learned from making lots of mistakes. I've made loads of mistakes. I've learned lots of things. And one of those is the importance of people coming on the journey and being a genuine part of a genuine process. And often when that happens, they come up with better ideas than I would ever have thought of. So it's a different skill that I have to use and that I've tried to learn over the years, to try to get those ideas on the table, help people feel valued in that whole process.
Okay, now I get how this could work in a big thing, like changing staffing structure, changing overall direction of vision, that kind of thing. I get how building a powerful guiding coalition, I think, could work in the kind of changing the orientation of a building. Take me down to a smaller issue. would it feel? What's a tinier issue?
One person had an idea of changing the way a Sunday meeting works, introducing another component into it. Would have been very easy for me or someone else just to say, yes, let's do it. But tried to develop the discipline of thinking, okay, who's involved? Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved, or the gatekeepers, or those you might want to be involved down the track on this particular issue? Go and consult with them now. See what they think. In other words, are they going to buy into the idea? Are they going to form part of this guiding coalition, which this is step 2, because they agree with step 1, which is the opportunity or the need. And so that process is really all about working out who is the guiding coalition that has sufficient impetus to head down this track, that will then take the lead and do so. Yeah.
Formulate a vision and initiatives.
Yeah, so really step 1, you've talked about what's the problem, what's the opportunity. That's actually quite important to articulate properly, by the way. So I've been in a variety of contexts talking to people where they have articulated the problem in terms of a solution.
Give me an example.
There is a particular service that is looking like X and it needs to look like Y. It needs to lose its liturgy or whatever. Someone has something in their mind, whatever that solution might look like. And so my approach now when I consult with people on this is to say, help me understand what the problem is. You've given me your solution. What's the problem? What are you trying to do? And you can do that just even for yourself. You can do that just by asking yourself the one-word question: why? The purpose question: why? And eventually, you take that example. It's about trying to position a Sunday service to be more outsider friendly. So I would say, well, go with that. Who's the guiding coalition? And then with that guiding coalition, work through step 3: formulate a vision. The vision is not to. And the articulation is so important. The vision is not to remove liturgy from the service in that example. The vision is to make Sunday church more accessible for the outsider. Different. And if you don't get that right there, then you're going to get people offside at all kinds of steps. It'll come back to bite later on. Yeah, that's step 3.
Communicate the vision and strategy to create buy-in.
We're not good at that. Another one of my mistakes. We could go for hours on my mistakes.
Our longest ever episode. We'll change the title of this one to Raj's Mistakes.
Yeah, we could do that. Reflecting on Raj's heart of mistakes or something like that. Again, I'm so thankful to the Lord for the people He's put around me over the years. And I remember a long time ago now, we developed a vision, we developed a strategy. I remember going around to all of the small groups, and I thought, we worked out a way forward. There were all kinds of decisions. One of those outcomes was actually employing a children's pastor, which we did. And it was brilliant. And the person, if you're listening, I miss you deeply. A few years later, we then said, okay, we now need to update, someone said, what's our strategy? Or something like that. And I said, oh, we've done that. And this person was in the room and said, oh, when did we do that? And I realised, that's right, we did that 5 years ago, and one of the outcomes was employing you.
Yep.
And it just put my head into this space. There's thinking about the number of new people in church, and many will have heard the saying vision leaks, and it does leak. Our temptation, it can be a bit like a male saying to their wife, I love you. You think you did that on your wedding day once. But of course you have to keep doing it. Vision leaks, we forget, we lose things. There's so many words we hear every day. And so experts in this space, they keep saying you have to reinforce. They talk about redundant communication. Basically, when you think you've communicated to death, what you need to do
is communicate a bit more.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add in this day and age is a term I heard, multi-channel communication. Different people receive different information in different ways. I used to think, I've sent an email, everyone knows. And you know, over time, it used to be the case, elderly people would say to me, Raj, elderly people don't communicate by email. Actually, it's the most reliable group.
Ones who do.
And I find now the challenge is actually younger people that just aren't on any particular platform. But to communicate anything, you have to communicate in all of those ways. So that's this step, the communication of vision and strategies, because the aim what you're looking for here is buy-in from as many people as you can possibly get. So beyond a guiding coalition, that might be if you're talking about morning tea, for example, it would be a team, a membership team or something like that, or a morning tea, or a welcoming team or something like that. But you need to communicate that then more broadly. You need to see buy-in, not just from that group, but a broader group.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to repositioning the building.
Yep.
You want to move from portrait to landscape because you think, your why is you think it's going to make the building, it's going to work better for contemporary communication, for not just download, but a more participatory feel. I think I've got your why. What would you have done if you? I mean, it blew up. You had to go back. What would you have done if you were going to do it right? What would you say to your younger self?
Well, look, there's too many scars on that one, Dominic. Let me pick another example.
Okay.
Which is, again, this is a small thing in many ways, and yet the investment that people have, particularly in an established church, around what can seem like minor issues, is just can be incredible. So the example is, we had pews.
Yep.
And we needed more seating. And
what did you do? Yeah.
Well, so the process on that occasion, I said to parish council, look, we need to, it's not a good thing, we need more seats. Right? Opportunity, need.
Yeah.
We need to work, so some people, well, we have to get more pews. Other people, I'm thinking, okay. So what I did, I said to parish council, look, let's form a group of people to talk about this. This was trying to work out a guiding coalition. Now, not a committee, committees work differently, but this was trying to work out a guiding coalition. On that occasion, I asked a trusted person to chair the chairing committee, and they work through this to try to work out a vision of what we're trying to achieve, to work through the issues. And that involves some open, robust conversations that were difficult, but they had to happen. It had to happen somewhere in the process, and it was better for it to happen then. They did that. Coming out of that, they had a vision. I don't think I had the steps of John Kotter in my head at that time, but that's what we did. And coming out of that, they made a decision for individual seats, and they had reasons for that, and they articulated those reasons, they communicated those reasons. So we went through a difficult journey early on, which saved us the pain later on.
Empower others to act on the vision and remove barriers.
Yeah. So you've got a guiding coalition, you've worked out a vision, there's a problem sitting behind that, you've worked out strategies, then you're asking yourself the question, what are the roadblocks to those strategies? What are the stumbling blocks you need to remove? What
about let's think about moving from generalist ministry to specialist ministry. There'll be some roadblocks in those conversations.
Yep, so number one question that comes out of those conversations, both in my experience and from what others have said to me they've gone through, who is my pastor? That's a stumbling block. It's a fascinating one to ponder because in a large congregation, like I had people say to me, and still do, who's going to do my funeral? And I thought, wow, who's going to do my wedding? You're married. I hope there's not another wedding. But these are the emotional things that people are grappling with. So,
and I did hear one large church that was making the transition from generalist to specialist, and I think the morning church congregation guy stood up and said, I'm not going to be your pastor anymore. And everybody felt grieving, but they didn't have anything to replace that with.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, he'd almost sunk the change management process by that one statement.
Yeah. So
what do you do?
The issue going on under there is people want to know who to connect with and how they can be part of a church family or gathering. So we have to think, and this is what we did and continue to try to do this. And if you're from my church and listening, please help us on this journey. How do we break that down for people? How do we help people overcome those barriers of knowing who to connect with?
So what do you do? How did you do that? I mean, I'm looking at this point of empower others to act on the vision and remove barriers. How did you?
So
because you've just gone through this, and presumably
in the process of,
and presumably people are asking that same question in your church.
Absolutely, And so, in fact, just Sunday gone, one of the things we did. There's a number of things we've done. So there's two parts to that: empowering people. So we need to empower people in the new structure to act in accordance with, in our case, the M pastors. We need to empower them to act, but in this framework, a blockage is the who is my pastor? Who do I connect with? That kind of issue. So what we need to do, and what we're trying to do and have is trying to break down that issue for people by helping them know who they can connect with. So in each congregation, there's someone, and I just say, look, if you don't know where to start with this person in this congregation, this person next, different names, we call them focus leaders, and they will help you. So we then produced a sheet, two-sided A5 sheet, circulated just the other day, different for each congregation, with those questions. Who's going to take my wedding?
Right.
Funeral. Well, we hope you never get there. Breaking down all of those questions to try to help people positively with that. And again, just because we've done it once, that's not enough. We have to keep doing it. Yeah.
Celebrate the visible, significant short-term wins.
Yeah, very important.
How do you do that?
So stories are so powerful here. So current context where we are undergoing significant change, I can see the wins already in so many areas.
You can?
Yeah. And so what I need to do, which I've been trying, is just to talk about some of the wins. Now, there's more to come. We have a set of goals that I think is just phenomenal and fantastic, and people have the time now to work on each of those. Now, I know that, but others don't. And so others can feel the grief of the loss of whatever, and this comes back to your earlier comment about the difference between church planting and established churches, where people do experience grief because they've lost something. But celebrating the wins helps people. Look, I've lost that, but now it's worth it for that conversation with someone. And now every other week, I mean, some weeks we just talk about the soccer or the cricket or the federal election or whatever it is, but every other week I'm talking about, and I'm encouraging someone, and I hadn't thought about ministry for you in this way before. And so those wins.
I'm just thinking of changing music from hymns to something more contemporary.
All of the controversial topics today, Dominic. What's wrong with hymns?
Well, I remember talking to some of the older people. You don't get There Is a Green Hill Far Away anymore, but you do get de facto grandchildren. And when the playlist was all There Is a Green Hill Far Away, there were no de facto grandchildren in this church. And what do you want? You can't have both.
Yeah. There's an example of a win.
And when they actually think about it like that, they do want de facto grandchildren more than There Is a Green Hill Far Away.
Yeah. So there's an example in this framework. It's helping people process the grief because of loss, which we all go through. In fact, I do have another slide. It's just a transition slide it's a good point to flick to it. It's yes, it's the one you got in front of you, which hopefully is on the screen. And this is just the grief slide, and everyone goes through in times of loss.
From shock, denial, anger to depression, and then exploration, acceptance and commitment. Take us through some of those changes. I mean, take me through a congregation through that series.
Well, look, the point of that diagram is everyone doesn't necessarily go through all of those stages, but you see down the bottom there's an ending, there's a neutral zone, and there's a new beginning. And different people will have different emotions in each of those stages. Our organisational psychologist Kirsty Bucknell, she talks about this at CMD, and it's just so helpful to appreciate, yes, there's a goal, but how do you help people on the journey? And that's what this is about. People will go through an ending, the grief process, and then there'll be a neutral zone of looking back and looking forward and seeing these. So that's where Kotter talks about how you need to help people at that time is help people celebrate the wins that we're already starting to see because of a new beginning. So it is deeply connected to that. So an awareness of that, psychologists use it in grief counselling and other places. But that's all connected to that step.
Last step, institutionalise new approaches in culture. What does that mean?
Yeah, so John Kotter talks about most people think they've made it too early. And we, at the first sign of some wins or some successes in whatever it is you're trying to do, morning tea, orientation at church, seating, whatever, you think you've won too early because you see some wins. That's not true, because people haven't dealt with the grief. And you need to help people fully go through that process. And then also just establishing the culture of this is the new normal.
My guest on The Pastor's Heart, Raj Gupta. He's with the Centre for Ministry Development at Moore Theological College and the Senior Minister of St Paul's in Carlingford in Sydney. You've been with us on The Pastor's Heart, and we will look forward to your company next Tuesday afternoon.